Can you account for your movements last night?
What I like about this game too is that you can actually ask the wrong questions and piss off the victim or piss off the witness, and then they stop talking to you. Oh, also too, on which I was very surprised about, is the game makers were pretty, best way I could describe it, brave. They use racial slurs in this game. I've had people steal their own cars and burn them for insurance fraud. I've had so many different things. People burglarize their own houses, saying someone burglarized their house, and we catch them in the end. So right off the bat about LA Noire is it's like the episode or like the TV show Dragnet. They kind of started that way, just has that epic detective gritty type of storyline, and that's what they did. Is like each episode or each mission was its own story. So in this particular episode, this is when Cole makes detective from being a patrol officer. There's a lot of resentment against Phelps making detective because he was so young and so inexperienced, whereas back then, well, even till today, you have to have a lot of time on, a lot of experience to make a detective. So it was kind of like, here's, who's this kid type of stuff. So, and this is where Phelps gets his first detective case. This is obviously Los Angeles Police Department. During this time era, they got a lot of things right, ladies and gentlemen. There is just so many different things they got right. And I'll give you a prime example. In one of the episodes, they talk about, I think it's Captain Parker, maybe even Commander Parker. They use that name Parker. While LAPD's last main police station was called Parker Center for that actual individual. So there are some real names in this game, as well as some of the lore that's in this game is actually true LA lore, like the Black Dahlia. There has been some speculation that some of the murders that they're solving are real murders that have happened in Los Angeles. And I'm going to say, yeah, that's pretty much true. They just changed some of the certs as well as some of the names, but in reality, you could pretty much find some type of news story as it relates to the actual crimes that you're taking a look at. Oh, also too, on which I was very surprised about, is the game makers were pretty, best way I could describe it, brave. They use racial slurs in this game. And, in this day and age, with, everything that's going on, a lot of people might say, well, they shouldn't have been doing that. They shouldn't have used that. It makes for better gameplay, just a better story. So it would be a difference. This would be a difference between today and back then. So this is the LA County coroner coming out to investigate the homicide, and they're going to do some stuff with it. Obviously going to do the autopsy, blah, 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 blah. Today, the actual coroner is not going to come out. As a matter of fact, there's only one head coroner, and then they have a bunch of other, the actual people who do the autopsies, but the coroner is the person who is responsible. But they'll send coroner investigators out, and these are a lot of either retired police officers or police officers that left the field to become an investigator with them, and they'll come out with the technician and they'll collect the body and sometimes the evidence, especially if it's really tied in tightly with the homicide, and they'll take it. So have I ever been on a scene where there was a lot of blood and no body? Yes. Unfortunately, a few times where you get someplace and there was blood everywhere, someone was a victim of something, but no body. And that's when you get on the radio and you have your communication start calling all the hospitals, like, hey, see if anyone was dropped off, that type of stuff, because that sometimes it happens, especially like with gang-related violence. There's just some great realism to the interview and the type of questions that he's asking. I'm going to tell you, the devs did a good job. They did their homework on how we would interact, and especially in this time frame, to be able to go back into time and kind of capture that. But I will say this, is that this time frame was kind of a dark time in law enforcement. It's where we get a lot of our bad reputation from, because it was really the way law enforcement treated people. I can wholeheartedly admit that. It's just there. It's a fact. So you can't say it didn't exist. But that was that time. And the game makers captured that. That's what the neat part about it. Because when I played this game, I was like, oh my gosh, did they just really say that? Did that person just really say that? So it was just really like, blew me away for a minute, like, wow, okay. And I really was able to get deeply into this game. As a matter of fact, I've been contemplating playing this whole game again, because now that I want to say I'm a better game player, I might do a little bit better in this game.
Is it wet, bright red, or...
They're not just handling this case. They're handling a crap load of other cases, just because of the amount of crime that comes in these days. So you don't really get to work cases like this where you just get to work it from beginning to end. You have other cases that you got to work in between this type of stuff. So just how it is today as opposed to it was back then. Okay, so on this part, If nobody was home, they would not be able to go into the house without a search warrant. They would have to get a search warrant. Now, the only way that they can search, even right now, is if she gives them permission to search the house. So they could say, ma'am, do you mind if we search the house? She says yes, then they're good to go. They can go ahead and search the house. People will ask me, like, if a spouse dies, is the other spouse the suspect? And yes, they are a person of interest. Even if it doesn't look like they were involved, you got to rule them out. You got to make sure they didn't plan this homicide. So you're going to ask them where their whereabouts are. You're going to ask them, all these different types of questions. But the evidence isn't pointing that way, but eventually comes back to a spouse or an ex-spouse or an ex-lover. It's how bad the person was killed. Was it just like a random stabbing or shooting? But when there's someone who has been just obliterated with injuries, there's multiple stab wounds, and there's it seems like there's some hate behind it, that's when you start asking questions of why did this type of trauma happen to this victim? And usually you'll find is that there's somewhere that the victim knew the suspect, but by the degree of injuries that are on the victim. So that's all you're sometimes able to tell immediately. Is this a random homicide, or is this a homicide that was perpetrated by somebody that the victim may have known?
I think you should come clean with us, Mrs. Black. Your husband is missing, and after our search, I'm willing to call the circumstances suspicious. Can you account for your movements last night?
What I like about this game, too, is that you can actually ask the wrong questions and piss off the victim or piss off the witness, and then they stop talking to you. So there's actually some cool stuff with this game where if you don't interview the person in the right order, or you don't do something in the right order, or when you're asking questions, if you go down the wrong path, that you close off that part of the case, and now you have to solve the case another way. So they've done some good jobs where solving the case is not just one way. There's multiple ways to solve the case, but some are easier than others. So they have all of those various different elements in this game. That was the other part that's neat. There was a time where you would just pick up and the operator would be on the other line, and you would be able to, hey, get me Klondike 4567, and it was this kind of Klondike stood for the first three numbers. I don't know if a lot of people know that information, hey, I'm trying to find this name, and they would actually look up the name in the directory and give you that person's phone number. So talk about a different time. I know that doesn't exist anymore, but talk about a different time. If you ask the right questions and go down the right path, then you have the truth, doubt, and lie. So you got to choose, what you believe in.
I'm sorry to
Now, I will say this too. You actually have to pay very big attention to the suspect or witness's facial expressions, because they'll let you know if they're lying or there's doubt and stuff like that. And they did a really good job, the game makers did, on those good looks of when someone's lying or someone had, there's some doubt and that type of stuff. So that's actually another good part about this game, a neat part about this game.
We could call the slaughter yard and nail you.
As a matter of fact, I think this game ends with you solving one of the most unsolved cases in LA history is the Black Dahlia. There's a lot of speculation on who really did that, but to this day, there is no definitive proof of who the Black Dahlia murderer is. And if you like stories like this, like these type of crime dramas, James Ellroy is a really good author. This whole story reminds me that James Ellroy could have written this. That's his type of nitty-gritty type of stories that he writes.
Message from technical services. Blood found in the abandoned.
I don't know if they would give that information over the radio, if they would just tell you to go ahead and make a call, but and again, I wasn't a detective back then, so I don't know if that part would be realistic.
Roger, KGPL.
If I remember correctly too, there were some iconic LA landmarks. I think La Brea Tar Pits is here. There's some other places that are very iconic to the landscape of Los Angeles in the game. But what's interesting though is about this game is, and being a former detective, is that there's not a lot that we do differently from this time frame to what we do today. Detecting is detecting. It's, trying to see if someone is lying to you, gathering the evidence and looking at the evidence. Now, we have a lot better tools today, such as, DNA and that type of stuff. But even back then, fingerprints were part of detecting. And I think fingerprints came around in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I believe Scotland Yard was the first one to use fingerprints. As a matter of fact, they came to the United States to teach our law enforcement about fingerprints. Yeah, not a whole lot of difference, following leads, interviewing people, and putting it all together. Hopefully it leads you to a suspect that you can arrest. And then you got to put all this together, and then the district attorney still has to file. Oh, has this ever happened? Hell yeah, this has happened. Oh, I have definitely had people who have faked crimes. Yes, I've actually had spouses pretend to be victims of spousal abuse by hitting themselves, causing bruising and that type of stuff, so that we would go and arrest their husband. So yeah, that type of stuff that happened. I've had people steal their own cars and burn them for insurance fraud. I've had so many different things. People burglarize their own houses, saying someone burglarized their house, and we catch them in the end. Someone taking off on you, yeah, that's actually fun. That's fun when they do that, because you're like, yes, here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Ali Noire, the game that started it all for me. And speaking of Gamology, you need to follow them on both YouTube and Facebook. Hit that subscribe button, that bell icon for instant notification, and I'll see you there. Until next time, peace.